So, good evening, everybody. Thanks for making it out on this cold, brisk night. It's not even winter yet. It feels like it. I'm David Simpson. I'm part of the fearsome foursome that runs BTGNY. Three of us are here tonight. Bruno in the back, Bruno Scap. Big hand for Bruno. And Deepak, who you just met there. So we kind of rotate the moderators for each of these fireside chats. We do them every other month. I see a lot of familiar faces here, so some of you have been here already. When I'm not doing this, my day job is with a digital solutions tech agency called Production. We took all the vowels out. It's spelled PRDXN. So if you look at prdxn.com, you'll see our site. And my guest tonight, sitting opposite me, is Nieuwoudt. Nieuwoudt. That shows you how good my Dutch is, which I believe means new wood, or new forest, new wood in Dutch.
Nieuwoudt.
Okay. Nina hails from South Africa. We're really delighted to have her here. She is VP of Product Development and Tech and Innovation at Mastercard Labs, just a little bit up the road here in Purchase, New York. And we'll be speaking for about 20 minutes about leadership management and technology. Nina's background is pretty fascinating. Around this time, my voice tends to fade because I've had laryngitis lately. So at any given moment, she and I have drilled substantially to move into sign language. So I hope that's okay with all of you.
My interpretation will obviously be to my advantage.
Which is good for me because I can be brief for a change, which is not one of my strong suits, as you've gathered. So Nina, as I said, is VP of Product Development and Innovation at Mastercard. How many people here have Mastercard in their wallet, in their pocket?
Could the rest please leave?
Raise those hands. Come on, raise those hands. Okay, pretty good turnout. More people over here on this side of the room. You may want to move over there to spread it out.
I must say I'm really impressed that most of you didn't pull out your wallets and start looking what you actually have, because most people go, I have a Chase, let me check what it is that I actually have.
Yeah, American Express, we won't say that. Nina, prior to joining Labs, she led the Mastercard New Consumers team to develop product and services, targeting those at the base of the financial pyramid. Her background is steeped in financial services before coming to the States 4 years ago.
Yep.
You've been with Nedbank, Standard Bank of South Africa.
Yep.
And we're delighted to have here tonight. Let's move into, so we're going to break this up into two buckets. Save all your questions for the end of tonight's fireside chat. I'm still trying to get the fireside put in, but they haven't done that. We will have a Q&A session afterwards for about 10 minutes, so hold your questions until we get through our chat. So we're going to start out with business management, leadership-related questions. So when I first met Nina and I went through her profile on LinkedIn, because that's what we always do, who is that person opposite us? You've made an interesting career choice. You've been pretty much in financial services and cards, if you will, for your entire life. Career, I would say working career. So what is it that appealed to you early on in this career choice and staying with it? In other words, where does this passion come for your chosen path in your career?
Sure. So, David, I'm not always sure, as most things in life, as you all know, we sometimes have plans and plans just are not what actually happens. And in this particular case, cards or finance, and none of that was anywhere in my plan or my thinking. And I actually stumbled into it by helping a friend, is the honest truth. And happy to share that with you guys. So if any of you have done some crazy things for friends, this one will probably make you feel a lot better. So at the time, I was sharing a townhouse in the center of South Africa in this town called Bloemfontein with one of my best friends from school, and we'd gone to watch cricket. I know it's not, none of you are familiar with cricket, but it's great. You watch a night game, everybody goes out there, and we bumped into one of the guy friends that was at school from us. And he was like, hey girls, I'm working as a recruiter at the moment, but I need a place to stay for the next couple of months. And we both went, oh, we've got a spare room. Oh yeah, you can come stay by us. Lo and behold, there's always trouble. When you're helping somebody else out because you think they're a hottie and you invite them into your house, you know there's trouble coming. And he was barely in when he came home the one afternoon, and he was like, hey Nina, I need to ask you a favor. I was like, what's it, Leon, what's up? And he was like, I need more people to apply for this particular job that I've posted. And he goes, nobody's applying for this role that fits the candidacy, but I need more people to apply. He goes, but you definitely will not be contacted. You're way too young, you don't have the right qualifications, you don't have the right experience. All I need you to do is fill out the application. I'll do everything for you. Just say yes. If my boss phones, you go, yes, I applied. That's it. It's for a friend. What do you do? Absolutely, Leon, no problem. So off the application goes in. A couple of nights later, I get home and there's flowers. And I'm like, wow, for an application. He goes, I'm really, really sorry. They want you to come for an interview. Right, okay. Again, it's for a friend. I'm like, Leon, if it can be first thing in the morning, last thing in the afternoon, I really don't want to tell my boss I'm going for an interview. So we'll help you out. This is it. He goes, fine. Got the interview set up for the first thing in the morning. I know I'm not getting the job. So I really don't care, okay? So off I leave, I rock up there, never forget, with my little black shoes, black pants, and a jersey. I was working for Premier Pharmaceuticals in their warehouse. So get there and I sit down and I have these two very prim and proper British ladies interviewing me. And I don't care, I'm too young, I know you don't want me, so I can tell you anything, whatever. Sit down and they ask me a couple of questions, all the formal questions, and Jenny Hammond looks at me and she goes, so tell me, when last have you lost your temper? Why and what did you do? And I go, actually, I waitress part-time, and Friday night this guy came into the restaurant, he sat at my best table, first sent back his salad, it had too much feta cheese in. I was like, who does that? I was like, he then sent his steak back because he put his finger on it and he said, if I can touch it, it's too cold. I was like, you can touch anything. Like when it comes out the oven, you can do that. Like, ugh. Said, I was really irritated. He then ordered an Irish coffee and he was like, I want sugar on the rim of my glass. So I'm now in the interview and I'm like, this really irritated me. I said, but that's what he ordered, that's what I gave him. I went to the back and went, like it, and I gave it to them. Okay? Because I don't care, I'm not going to get the job.
That's why I never complain in restaurants anymore. You just know they're doing something with it back in the kitchen.
So, and in hindsight, I wonder, what was I thinking? My mother would die, so many people would die, but I told him this in the interview because I'd been told, I'm not getting the job. And a couple of days later, I'm sitting at my desk and my phone rings and I answer, hello, Nina speaking, and the person goes, Pumpkin. I'm like, who's your pumpkin? And it's Jenny Hammond none the least. And she goes, I really want you to work for me. She goes, but there's some things we need to talk about.
That's funny.
So that's how I stumbled into CARD. And when she came up, she was like, the first thing we're going to do is go buy you makeup. I was like, why do I need makeup? She was like, because that's what you do when you've got a real job. And she goes, and if anybody says to you, how old are you? You go, oh, why are you asking that? And that's not polite. She goes, never expose your age. And that is how I stumbled into CARD.
Right.
And I loved it because CARD is ever changing. Okay. And it's one of those jobs that you do that you can see makes real impact. And I've been fortunate that most of the projects that I've worked on, I've met amazing people and I can see tangible things that it's done for other people. So moved on, I then moved from Bloemfontein to Johannesburg with Nedbank, and again had huge opportunities on just working with things, and always realized there was something that you can do where you're not repeating the same day, and every day is different, and it's evolving, and it's fresh on a continuous basis. So
interesting. Can you help me with my credit card debt after the meeting?
Absolutely.
I'm
I'll
a
give you a
Mastercard
bank's
holder
name.
as well. Good. I wanted to shift gears for a minute. So that's interesting. So you came here 4.5 years ago.
Yes.
Incredible opportunity.
Yes.
You settled in the Northeast. The weather's not that great, but I can imagine it was warmer in South Africa than it is here.
It was, but the one thing is that I love about the weather, I always go, the seasons are very distinct. If I look out my window and it's white, it's winter. If it's green, it's summer. There's daffodils and tulips, it's spring. And
Yeah,
if
you
there's
do
just
have
lots
the
of
variety,
colors, it's fall. So love that part of the seasons. But
great.
by the 5th snowstorm, I do generally go, what more of this?
Yeah, wait till you get your plowing bill. That's interesting. So I wanted to move, let's talk a little bit more about people that, so along your journey, you've met a lot of people, I'm sure. You've mentioned some now. When you first started out at work, that was pretty funny. Who would you say, who you've run into, who's been a mentor, or a person over the course of your career who's had a big impact on you, for better or worse, but in terms of things that they might have imparted or shared with you, or that you learned from them. Is there anyone specifically who you would point to as someone who's influenced or impacted your career, one way or the other?
There's multiple people, and I don't think one person can ever go, one person had this level of impact on me. I think there's good, and we often, when people go, somebody had a great impact for X, Y, and Z, we automatically expect for somebody to go, this was a bad leader and this is how they impacted me. I don't think there's such a thing as a good or bad. There's good, and then there are those that you don't want to be like. Okay?
Good point.
And I think that's what you need to remember. So even when you've got that horrendous moment happening around you, you need to step back and take that lesson out and go, that is not what I want to be. That's not what I want to be in the future, and that's not what I want to be in my daily life. And whether you're doing that in a work environment or outside there, it doesn't go always about that person. It goes about how do they make the other person feel. And often, even if it's not happening to you, you see a leader treating somebody else in a specific way and you go, that's really not cool, or that should not be tolerated. Remember, you are always in a position of a leadership, whether you're at work, whether you're at home, whether you're in your community. And you need to remember, people will not remember you, but they will remember how they felt in a specific moment, and you've got control over that. And there are different people that I remember that I would look at and I would go, never ever want to be with you, or be like you, and that's it. But there have also been people that I initially thought, like, I never want to work for you again, that I've landed up a second time working for, that have become really dear and decent people. And in hindsight, I would probably go, their way of teaching was maybe super harsh, but when I realized what the lesson was, it was phenomenal.
And maybe they changed too.
I think it's a question of they changed as well. There's one particular example. I was working at Bluebeam. Uri and I touched on it earlier, and we were working on this campaign, and the one person that was one of our senior people, he was like a school teacher. He would take anything to him, and he always had his red pen out, and he would circle, and he would change, and he would move, and it would drive everybody nuts. And then you would take 3 versions later back, and then he would be changing it back to the first version. And you'd go, is he schizo? Like, what is wrong with this man? And we would all move on. And I'd been working like a crazy person on a particular booklet, and I took it to him and I was like, hey, I just want to get your view. And obviously the red pen came out, and he was beep, 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 beep. And he got to the end and I said, thanks, I just wanted your view. I'm actually not changing anything because I'm happy with what it is. And he went, you have grown up. I was like, what do you mean? And he went, as a leader, I'm here to get you to a place of confidence. And he goes, while you keep still asking people and then you keep changing to please them, you have not formed yourself. And I was like, what? It's taken me all these years to get to that. Why didn't you just tell me you wanted to stand my ground? But there's not always, even though people rub you up the wrong way, there's other lessons that you need to be open for and be ready to take in and turn into a positive experience.
So the micromanaging was a bit of a ruse.
I think it was just his personality. I'm sure if I spoke to his team today, he probably still does it. I think it's just ingrained, and you just need to learn to push back and go, this is mine, I'm owning it, I'm taking it forward.
Yeah, that's a good segue to the next question I'd like to pose regarding traits in leadership, if you will, different styles. The Microsoft CEO, Satya Nadella, wrote an article not too long ago. It appeared in, I think you might have posted it. Maybe, I think. Sammy here from Havas. He looks for, these are 3 traits in leadership that Satya Nadella looks for in leaders. One of them is an ability to create clarity when none exists. No one's ever run into that, I'm sure. A knack for sparking energy. And the third one is an ability to succeed in an over-constrained space. I guess what do these 3 things, these 3 traits mean to you? I'm happy to repeat them if you'd like. And maybe add a couple others based on your own experience. So the first one was clarity and direction. An ability to create clarity when none exists.
I think there's always gray in any environment. And a true leader helps a team understand how they're passing through the different shades of gray and where they're ultimately wanting to end. I think there's also a question of people need to be comfortable within shades of gray and understanding why it exists. Okay? if you're always in a black and white environment, there's probably not a need for anybody. However, a leader or a manager needs to be clear enough of where the end point is and be able to have the discussions there to make sure that everybody on their team has got the same vision and understanding where they're going to. I think it becomes a problem when it's grey and people feel as if they're out in the wilderness. That is when it's not great. A leader is also somebody who's happy to be challenged. If you've got a leader who you cannot ask questions to or going, are we doing the right thing? Then they're probably not a leader. There's a difference between somebody giving commands and somebody who can lead a team and take them to a next level. So grey is there, it exists, and how do you get through it is ultimately important, but communication is probably the biggest thing to get you through that, and making sure people understand that. Your next one was with regards to
Sparking
energy.
yeah, the knack for sparking energy.
So I think energy and passion go hand in hand. If somebody's passionate, you'll probably find the energy comes out. I've never seen somebody who's passionate who doesn't have energy. Like, it just does not happen.
Or unless they're passionately sleepy.
Or passionately grumpy.
Yes.
I think the two really go hand in hand. It's a question of how do you cultivate that and how do you make people comfortable with that. People have got different levels of showing enthusiasm, and just because somebody might not outwardly be showing their enthusiasm or passion, how do you still make them feel part of the team, even though they've got a different way of other people? I always go, when you're looking at a team, there needs to be enough diversity, whether it goes about the way people show themselves or how they present themselves, that all needs to come out there. But if you're making somebody do the same thing every single day and they're not seeing any result, you're killing the passion immediately.
True.
Okay? And you need to give people the ability to go, what are you bringing to this and what do you want to do? And we all have days where we don't want to do things. Okay? Whether there's admin work, great, like that's just one of it. Suck it up, get it over and done with. But if somebody's been working on a project and you can see they're losing it, give them something else. I don't think there's anything worse than when you've got people who want the stimulation and you've just put them on the same track day in and day out. Eventually it kills them.
Yeah,
so you need to be aware of that. And with, again, I go back to my thing of communication.
And in your line, it's particularly important because when you kill the passion, you kill innovation. You kill creativity. So
yeah,
that's one of your minefields that you have to manage. The third one was an ability to succeed in an over-constrained space. You and I talked a little bit about that. Your point of view, really, that success is an option, is really an opinion.
Yeah. And people probably go, what does that mean? Why would you say it's an opinion? And it is absolutely opinion, because you may put together the most perfect project plan, build the most perfect solution, put every dime you have on it and saying this is going to just blow the lights out and be phenomenal, and something weird or wacky happens and it doesn't happen. Okay? That does not equal failure. Okay? It equals a lesson that's been learned. So there's still been success. And as long as you can take that lesson, apply it to something else, there is still success. And no matter how small the success is, that success needs to be celebrated, and you can't keep going, no, failure. We've become very stereotyped in how we measure things, and if we put the measurement up front and going, this is how we will measure success, but it didn't meet up this is what happened, what is the other positive that we can look at it? So I definitely view it as an opinion. It doesn't mean you delivered what was expected, but you can go, these are the lessons that we learned, and I will not repeat these mistakes.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, whatever you're presenting, statistically valid or otherwise, you still are relying on the opinions of other people who define whether that's success or failure.
Yeah.
What are some of the other traits, quickly, that you look for in leaders?
The trait
you mentioned
that
authenticity.
I love authenticity.
Yeah.
And I think it means so much. Nobody's perfect, and look for a leader that can actually own up to that and going, I'm not perfect, but I'm trying. You're my team. I don't know everything. I need you to come here, but I also need you to help me grow. And if a person's authentic, they can get through it. I think there's also a question of, it comes down to how do you respect others, how do you work with them. If you're authentic, you'll be fine. If you're not authentic, you're focused on something else, and you're always going to try and be something that you are not, and people feel it and they don't want to be with you. We all have good days, we all have bad days, we all have things that we like, we've all got our quirks. Accept that, and there's nothing worse than having a leader that's super rigid, that you just feel you can't approach, they don't understand, and they're not open to any type of connection. So authenticity is high on mine.
And then we talked a little bit also, I think the other two that you mentioned were how you treat, or how they treat other people, and are their values similar to yours?
Yeah. So
I'm getting waved at by Deepak. We have 5 minutes. I'm gonna go 10. Okay. And we'll skip. This is.
Just don't forget the Q&A.
That's fine.
I mean, there's so many things which you can see from a person by just watching them. And it doesn't go how people treat people that are more senior to them. It doesn't go about how they treat people that can do something for them. It's how they treat the person or the people that cannot do something for them. Okay? You need to watch how do they treat the person standing on the side of the road? How do they treat the person when they're at a restaurant? Do they remember basic things like saying thank you? Okay? Those are pretty good indicators of how they're going to treat everybody else around them. It really goes down to basics and just how human, how approachable, how authentic they are, and what they do. I strongly recommend you look at all of those type of things, and how much time have they got for others. That basic decency, not just for the people that do something for them, but who are the people that they can lift up.
We had 3 more questions on leadership and management. I'll do one more, and then we'll move into tech, because after all, we're business and technology.
You're getting the hand.
Yeah. We should just move into tech. I'll just ask one more. What is the one behavior trait that you have seen derail more leaders' careers?
Arrogance. Woo.
Don't they go hand in hand?
I think arrogance just is probably the word I would put to it,
Yeah.
but we all know the behavior.
True.
Yeah.
Yes.
And if you don't, we can
I see a lot of eyes rolling in the back of the room.
It's a long discussion. We can have that afterwards, seeing as I think we've only got 4 left. 4 minutes.
Yeah, that's right. So all right. So we can come back during Q&A, and you can explore any of these questions with Nina. Let's move into tech-related questions. So this is something that we talked a little bit about, sort of comparing different sides of the ocean. So for example, I grew up in Belgium and in the UK, and friends that I have are always amazed over there at sort of how technologically we're catching up. But in your area of expertise, which is pretty much payments, reliance and dependence in the USA on traditional payment methods, whereby in Belgium, the UK, other countries, the check has gone the way of the dinosaur, which is kind of interesting. What's your view on this? Is this still the case? Are there things progressing here that you're excited about in your 4 years? What's been sort of your view in the last 4 years of how much progress we've made? Is this something that's more fictitious than real? It's something that's been pointed out to me many times. What's been your experience coming from over that side of the pond?
So when I first arrived, it was probably the things that fascinated me the most, because I'd not used a checkbook in South Africa for 20 years. And when I went to HSBC, the woman said, "Do you want a checkbook?" I was like, "No." Why? And she sort of smiled at me, and off I left. And a week later I was back, and she went, "I knew you would be back. Here's all your checkbooks." And I was fascinated by this. And then I was like, what on earth? This is America, people. This is the world leaders. What are we doing writing checks out here? And then I was digging deeper because I really wanted to understand this phenomena, and spoke to people back home, spoke to people that were older than me, that were around before the 20-year thing. Why did we stop using checks there? What happened? And a lot of it goes back to infrastructure. And in South Africa, for example, people stopped using checks because checks were being stolen, and people were using invisible ink to change their amounts, and check fraud was huge. So people stopped using the postal system, okay? Which then led to people going, hold on, but I want to get my money. What do you mean? I'm not going to get a check. What do you mean? How's money going to work? And it's not feasible for people to walk around and pay checks to each other. There's distances, there's all of that good stuff. So if you compare the internet banking system that we have in South Africa, hugely different, okay? You can log on, you can pay people, the money's there immediately, and all of these good things. So there came my next experience. Obviously, being brand new to the country, I needed to build up a credit history and a profile. So I did what all good immigrants did, and I opened myself a Coles charge card. And the first month I was like, I'm ready to make my payment. And I went onto my internet banking, and I went, pay the card. And they went, payment will be received, I think it said 9 days. I was like, what? There's no little band tamping the thing that makes the money move. How does this go? So off again I went. I was speaking to people. I was like, how does this work? How does the internet banking transaction take 9 days? In a developing country, it happens If not immediately, it happens within 24 hours. Lo and behold, they said, well, Nina, actually what it means here when you do internet banking, there's a message being sent to the bank from you that says, please write a check and post it to Coles. And that's how long they expect it to take. I was like, okay, so we should not be calling that internet banking, people. And again, it comes down to the postal system works in this country. And while something ain't broke, don't fix it. And that's where a lot of this differentiation comes in of what people see. The challenge comes in that a lot of people look here and they go, we should be ahead of the curve. Why should we listen to what's happened in some developing country? However, the developing countries have got so many more problems and issues that they're coming up for instant solutions because they're solving something. And as much as what we may not have the same problems, we could probably do things a whole lot cheaper and easier. One example is when I was in South Africa, I worked on a program called SASSA, which was basically the social disbursement program in South Africa. And South Africa being fairly unique, smallish country, 52 million people, but about 17 million people receive social grants every month. And historically, all 17 million people were receiving their payments in cash and checks, okay? And when we moved them over to debit cards, Mastercard debit cards with biometrics, we basically saved the government about $700 million in 5 years, okay? And part of that issue was a check was costing double the money of what it was to do electronic transfer. The other issue was when people were getting cash, they weren't receiving their full cash amount, and there's a huge amount of cash trucks that were getting robbed and everything, versus when it was being done digitally, people were receiving the right amount at the right time. And social grants are a global thing. Have not found a country where it does not take place, okay? However, there are so many governments which still do it in checks. So even if we just looked at how much money we could save from a taxpayer perspective, if we moved that digitally in a different way, that already goes, there's reason why we need to look at better ways, irrespective of our infrastructure that works and functions and gets the job done. If there's a better way to do something and it's more efficient, we should definitely look at that and do it for the greater good of everybody.
2 more questions. You've got 2 minutes for each one.
Okay?
Okay.
Who's counting?
That gentleman back there, Dr. No.
Deepak, don't be the fun burglar.
So I'll cut to the quick here. Just in the last 3 or 4 years, what are some of the technologies or innovations that you can speak to at Mastercard? Are you doing in this area of payment security, frictionless shopping experience? If you could share some of that with us. And then also the second question after that would be, within your space, within Mastercard and your team, how do you encourage, promote, or drive innovation and creativity within that team?
Sure.
So they're sort of interrelated.
Sure.
2 minutes, go.
Go.
For the first one.
So I specifically focus on everything related to safety, security, and identity. So just to put in context and perspective where we're coming from, if you look at how quickly those things are moving, and as consumers, we have all become fairly spoiled. You'll shop online, and if they ask you too many questions, you just dump your basket and you move on, and you go to a different site. I can do this differently. We've all been spoiled with the solutions like Uber. You get into a car, you get out, it doesn't feel like you had to pay. Yes, feels great, don't have to dig for anything. I'm registered on Amazon, I shop, I get it. But how many times do we not become worried about whether our data is safe? Are we worried about the friction? Where does it come from? I don't want the friction, but how do we take it out? So some of the things that Mastercard has looked on, we've done acquisitions to partners like NewData, Brighterion, which are all things which happen in the background. I call it, they are part of the miracle work which happens. So simple examples, if you think about how do you use your mobile phone, okay? How do you actually use that information? How do you use your track, your behavior, your biometrics behavior versus what's actually been put in there? So a simple example, if they looked at my profile on my phone, they went, great, she logs on every morning at 6 a.m. onto her bank, she types her password in at this speed, and she's normally holding her cell phone at this angle because she's lying in bed. Great. 2 days later, somebody else is logging in at 2 a.m., they're typing slower than what Nina normally types, and the phone is lying flat like that. Should that be a warning sign? And is that not the time that they should be saying, can you put your password in? Alert, something's up here, this is not her. And based on how you're holding your device, at what speed are you typing, what type of information are you looking for. And that is when people are going, I'm happy to do my step up. But if I'm doing my normal stuff and it is me and you can detect that through my biometric behavior, then we should not be creating extra passwords. And it becomes super interesting if you think about passwords, just some stats to make you guys think about it. Currently, the average person needs to remember 200 passwords.
What?
Yeah. The average person is needing to remember 200 passwords. And then they come and they go, please don't repeat your passwords. And please don't use the same things out.
And change it every 60 days.
And change it every 60 days, if not sooner. And they look at all of that stuff. So how on earth are you meant to keep track of all of that? Okay? Oh, you're going to write it in a little black book and then go through your black book, which gets stolen, and it's even worse. And
There's an app for that.
there is an app for that, but that's what I'm saying. Like, we've created all of these things, but we also need to realize, if you think about data breaches, what's happening and where we're coming from. So let's just throw some stats around here, and I don't want to get them wrong because that will just be sad. So currently the global population is at 7.6 billion. Do we all agree on that? Okay, give or take, couple. Okay. Currently the estimate is that there's 3.2 million people who are active online. And I think that's most of you people here. You all active online? Great. So now let's speak about how many data records have been compromised since 2013.
Ouch.
Okay, so that's 9 billion.
9 billion.
9 billion records which have been compromised. Okay. Now when we think about the data records that have been compromised, we're speaking about static data. So when we speak about static data, it's the information that doesn't change. What's your name? What's your last name? What's your mother's maiden name? What is your date of birth? And that information was relevant yesterday. It's relevant today. It's going to be relevant 6 months from now. It's going to be relevant 2 years from now. So whether the data breach took place today, yesterday, 6 months ago, when is that data going to be used? It's still going to be relevant. So we need to start moving away from this type of information. The other thing we need to really look at is we need to move away from having what we call honeypots of data. All this data being stored in one place, because hackers have got their pride, guys. They're not going to go after the one person when it's decentralized data of going, oh, I want to hack that one, I want to hack that one. They're going after what we call these honeypots of data, where there's data that can be used, minimal effort, lots of info that can be sold and used.
Like Marriott.
I know. And I've stayed at a couple of them, so I'm definitely doubling up my numbers on how many times my information has been
They got your pet's first name.
Absolutely. So those are the things that we need to think of. Those are the concerns that we have, that we try and make go away, or that we're not inconveniencing customers at the end of the day when they're using their cards or their accounts to make payments.
Yeah, now there's voice recognition, facial recognition. Interesting, the thing about tipping it and typing it, and
Yep.
if you're inebriated, that could be a problem.
I know, isn't
You
it?
They probably have a way of figuring that out too. Or if
Oh,
you're
it's
just
Friday night. It's always this behavior on a Friday night.
All right, last one, I promise. This has to do with how do you encourage, promote, and drive innovation and creativity within your team?
The first thing I do to drive creativity and innovation is employ people that are different. Okay? If there were 10 of us that think the same, behave the same, we don't need 10 people. Then one of us is good enough. Okay? You need to bring diversity to the table. And by diversity, I mean the way they think, the way they communicate, their background, everything. Because they can speak for a different population which you're not thinking about. They can speak about different experiences. A 50-year-old thinks vastly different to what a 22-year-old thinks.
Sure.
And they've both got reason, and they've both got voice, and they've both got something to bring to the table. So I think that's where it starts. You've also got to give people free rein. It's always better to hold a horse back than to be standing behind it and smacking it and going, let's think about something.
True.
And no one person can come up with a perfect idea, so you need to have that cohesive, I belong to a team, I can add on. And no matter how crazy or great my idea is, I want to put it out there and let other people add on. And every time somebody adds on, we need to break it down, make sure that there's something that we're not just thinking of from our perspective. I always go, have we drank too much of our own Kool-Aid? Let's rethink about this and let's challenge it. And if we all think it's phenomenal, get somebody to challenge every single thing. And even if it's the person who came up with the idea, so you know fundamentally they believe in it, they need to then come out and going, well, that's wrong, or what if that happens? You need to question, And questioning is not aggressive, questioning is not negative, it's making sure that you've thought of every single angle. And that's something which I think is critically important when you're thinking about innovation and how do you drive teams forward.
Really the diversity and inclusion essence of that is really behind the whole rationale for diversity and inclusion in any business, because you're bringing all these different perspectives, people from different cultures, different experiences, different backgrounds. So it's no different in innovation. Helps drive innovation.
Humans are strange things. They like to be around people that think the same as them, believe the same as them, and not be
and we all
pushed.
Yes, true. Okay, we've run over time. I think, Deepak, are you having a coronary? Are you okay? All right, coronary. We'll take some questions now from the audience.
So we work across multiple teams, and we've got what we call innovation labs around the world. So when people start working on projects, it typically gets handed over from one lab to another at night or for the next day, and that also brings in the diversity factor. I think it's a question of when you come up with ideas, you've probably got to come up, there's some crazy stat that they go, for every 150 ideas, there's only one that's a really good idea. It's to be brave enough also to kill an idea when it's not right, and going, do not become emotionally attached to an idea. Take it to a point, but you've also got to keep a cool head and going, this is not doing what we thought it would do, or this is not going to meet what customers are needing for. Is it premature? Are we too late? Or whatever it may be, which really needs to be real. You've also got to understand, once you've got a product out there and you're piloting, how nimble you need to be. Because something which may have seemed small during development may become a massive hurdle. How quickly can you do that? And how quickly can you show that you've taken action on something which may not have been great? It's testing, it's being open to feedback, and do not think that every comment coming back to you is criticism. It's something to help you make the product better. Personalities, I mean, it's a question of respect, and people behave how they see other people behave around them, and more senior people. So you've got to make sure that people are comfortable to have open conversations and to show respect for each other. Whether it's the person who's really quiet getting up and saying something for the first time, give them the respect so they can be heard, and understand who are the people that dominate. And if there are people that always dominate the conversation, say to them, can you take a different angle on this one? Or can you work with that person? It's all about continuous developing and making sure that every person walks out at the end of each day going, I learned something today, I felt as if I contributed, it was a good day, I want to come back tomorrow. A lot of that comes back in being honest throughout the whole process. There's nothing worse when everybody goes, oh, that's great, and nobody actually thinks it's great. I'm not sure if you've ever been into a meeting and you've had a meeting and the person who set up the meeting has sort of stepped away and everybody goes, what was that about? I thought we were coming here to speak about X, but during the meeting nobody actually had the guts to go, hey, I thought we were discussing X, why have we got into Y? And we set up now, we actually need 3 minutes. It's a very simple call, this is what we should be doing. Everybody keeps quiet. And I think there's a level of bravery which needs to come out, and it's a safe environment. As a leader, you need to create a safe environment that people feel comfortable in doing that, and knowing that there's not going to be any backlash towards them should they speak up, should they question, and it's okay. It's how people question often that becomes a matter of saying, happy for you to question, don't be rude about it, or don't get personal with the person that's raising the question. Whether it's your project or not, we're a team, we're doing this for the better. Everybody goes out and defends each other fiercely when we're outside this room. In this room we can question each other and do this, but it's not personal. We can do it inside, we can go get coffee afterwards, and we fight the fight together.
Thank you.
Okay.
One more?
That's a fairly difficult one.
She's known nothing but success.
It's all in the opinion, remember? My opinion, everything's been a success. There's been a number of products that I think have tanked, where the person who's pitched them has done a really good sales job. Shame on me for falling for them a second time, The first time I was like, wow, it seemed like they had it all wrapped up. They had the right customers. Second time around, I fell for them. Third time around, I was like, no, not falling for that. Don't do that. No, I'm not buying your story. I'm not buying what you're saying. That's not going to happen. So there's a level of how people pitch an idea versus what is real and what they've really lined up. You need to be able to differentiate between that from a success versus that's not going anywhere. And I think you've also got to understand what their personal drive is in making them do that. That also being said, I think one of the most surprising things which can tank a project or a product really quickly is if you've got somebody that's passionate about it and they've put all the relationships together, and for whatever reason that person moves on to a new role or they get promoted and you bring somebody else in, it tanks not because of the product, not because of the project, but there's a different personality in, and maybe they do have the same amount of passion, but they haven't built the same rapport, or they're not as closely with the customers. That I've seen happen way too often, where things have been absolutely on the line to success, a different person comes in, and it just drops. So. How much time do you have?
1 minute.
Scotland must be the place to stay because their national animal is a unicorn. For starters. No, okay. On a serious note, I really believe that there's money to be made with technology when it's used in the right way and at small increments at a time, and the impact that it can have. The banking world has yet to come there. We've still very much got the stereotype in banking that it needs to be high value, lots of volume for something to work and to be financially feasible. I've seen projects where it's small values continuously and it still forms to be financially feasible. So that's something that I believe passionately in. And there's a lot of people that go, I'm not even having that conversation with you because you just go way too aggressive. And I'm going, well, it's been proven and we need to change that. The other thing that and this might seem a bit controversial from where you're sitting versus I'm sitting, I do think there's a need for us to change how we do the banking in the world. Okay? I think there's a percentage of the people in the bank or in the world that are banked by banks who are comfortable going into a bank. And then there's a large percentage of people who are uncomfortable going to banks, and retailers should be stepping up and filling that gap. If you think about it, when you go into the bank, they're probably using terminology that you're not comfortable with, and you're probably already feeling uncomfortable, even for this group, how we dressed here tonight. You walk into the bank and they've got their suits on and their tie, and they're all very perfect, and you sort of go, well, I just want to have a very simple question with you, but I feel a little bit uncomfortable. So think of the people who have never had a bank account. Why would they want to go into that environment to try and have that conversation? Okay? Why would somebody who's 15 or 16 who's trying to open a high school account want to go into an institution which feels stuffy, really formal, they don't get me, they're outdated? However, those same people that we are trying to bank would probably happily walk into a supermarket, whether it's Stop and Shop, Walmart, CVS or wherever, and go, hey, I'm trying to open a bank account. I want to have something where I can put money in and get it out. How do I do that? And they go, sure, this. Because they've probably seen that person on every shopping trip. So there's a level of trust. There's a level of, I can speak my language. I can ask you stupid questions. And I know it'll definitely not be the worst question you've had from anybody having this conversation. I think there's a definite need for that. I think banks have stuck to their traditional model for way too long. And in some ways, they've caused the separation between which customers they want and which customers still need to be banked. But that I can go on for 3 days. Solid.
And we're out of time. I think there's still some refreshments left in the back, some wine, soft drinks, maybe a little cheese and crackers. Thank you all for coming tonight. We're staying open till 8:30. I'd like to thank Nina for
Thank you
being
for having
with us
me.
tonight. Well done, that was fun.
Thank you.
We didn't have to go into sign language, so that
I
was
know.
good. But enjoy yourselves till 8:30, then we'll give you the heave-ho. Happy holidays to everybody. Just so you know, we'll be doing our next BTGNY Fireside Chat probably middle of February. We have some interesting speakers lined up for 2019. We hope you'll spread the word, tell people about our community. You can certainly, join up, sign up on Meetup. But again, thanks for coming, and enjoy the evening.
Thank you. Thank you.